Have you been in this situation? You're playing along, and boom! It rears its ugly head, the dreaded diminished 7 chord. Oh no, what do I play? If that describes you, then stick around, because I'm going to give you some tools so you will no longer fear the diminished chord. Don't fear diminished. Don't fear diminished. You'll be able to play it. Don't fear diminished. In case you don't know what a diminished chord is, diminished means to make smaller or to squish. And that's exactly what a diminished chord is. It's as compact as a chord can get in traditional harmony. As always, there will be a lesson that you can download below. In traditional harmony, we think in thirds, and minor third is the smallest interval. A minor third is 3 semitones or 3 half steps, and that's easy to figure out on guitar. You go up 3 frets at a time. So I'm going to play a B, up 3 frets to D, up 3 frets to F, up 3 frets to G sharp or A flat. On guitar, you can't play those notes in that order. It's just too hard. You'd hurt yourself. So we're going to take those same notes and we're going to stack those notes in a different order. So we're going to go B, then to the F, then a G sharp, then a D. So now we have our B diminished. Because it's stacked in thirds, it's symmetrical. And what symmetrical means is if you were to fold the chord in half, it would look identical on this side, it would look identical on that side. So because it's symmetrical, every 3 frets, the chord repeats itself. So in other words, that's the inversion, is every 3 frets, the same 4 notes keep recycling through. We have B, F, G sharp, D. D, G sharp, B, F, F, B, D, G sharp, G sharp, D, F, B, and then we get back up to here, where we're started from, but an octave higher, back to a B, F, G sharp, D. Also, because it's symmetrical, the fingering stays exactly the same. There are only 3 diminished chords that exist. Everything else is just inversions of the original 3. Let's boil it down to these 3 chords. B diminished, C diminished, and C sharp diminished. Think of each diminished chord that I just mentioned as a family. The original chord plus 3 inversions, B diminished, D diminished, F diminished, and G sharp diminished. But it's really just B diminished, right? In C diminished, you have this family. C diminished, E flat diminished, G flat diminished or F sharp, and A diminished. In the C sharp family, you have C sharp diminished, E diminished, G diminished, and A sharp diminished or B flat diminished. Each one, like the first one, just keeps recycling the same notes over and over again. If you like what I've been putting down, please hit that subscribe button and hit that bell icon so that you're notified every time I put out a brand new video. So now that you know what the chord is, how do you play over it? We're going to look at 3 scales to use, some arpeggios, and some different chord voicings so that you can sound more hip. The whole half diminished scale is where these chords come from. And that's the simplest thing to do, is just play that scale over top of the chord. I've marked the notes in the scale that spell the diminished chord. Did I mention there's 8 notes in the scale? And in between, we have 9, 11, a flat 13, and a major 7. So when we put all those notes together, we get the full picture of the scale. We have a B, C sharp, D, E, F, G, A flat, A sharp, B. And then we have our full B diminished scale. I found that it's not the most easiest scale to figure out fingerings for, and it can really mess up the flow if you're thinking about where to put your finger. However, in my book, New Approach to Scales, I figured out a great fingering that I want to share with you, and it lays out this pattern, and it works a little nicer, like this. Harmonic major inherently contains a diminished chord on the 7th degree. You can use harmonic major scale technically anytime you see a diminished chord. So in this example, we've got an E flat diminished chord going from an E minor to a D minor 7. Because a diminished chord is so unstable to begin with, it doesn't really matter too much what note you target. Because it's symmetrical, it already has a disorienting vibe to it. However, I still try if I can to start on one of the chord tones. I just want to let you know that I have a Patreon page. I have some really cool bonus material, some drills, some videos, and some extra lessons at my Patreon page that are only available if you're a patron. Check out the Patreon link below. Like harmonic major, harmonic minor works the same. And I like it a little bit better because it sounds even less abrupt. It gets you a little closer to the minor scales that you're using already over the minor chords, because it contains a minor third instead of the major third, like in harmonic major. Here's an example using harmonic major. And here's an example using harmonic minor on both diminished chords. Notice in that last example, though, that the chord only lasts for 2 beats. In this case, it could be either because each scale is so similar. We didn't have time to squeeze that distinguishing note, the third, in there. So what I would focus on is the top part of the scale, the fifth, the flat 6th, the major 7th, and the root. That's where you're going to get the flavor of both scales anyway. But if you have time to get the difference of the minor third or the major third in, that slight difference that you might hear is kind of cool. Are you cool? You know what's cool? Hitting that subscribe button. Come on, do it. Go for it. Another thing to consider is how the chord is functioning. Is it a passing chord? Or is it really just functioning as a dominant chord? Let's take a look at what I mean. There's 4 dominant 7 chords buried within the diminished scale. So if we take the B diminished scale, we have a B flat 7, a D flat 7, an E 7, and a G 7. If you raise the root of any of those dominant chords, then you will get the diminished 7 chord and its inversions. So if I raise the root B flat, I get B diminished. If I raise the root on the D flat chord, I get D diminished. If I raise the root on the E7 chord, I get F diminished. If I raise the root on the G7 chord, then I get G sharp diminished or A flat diminished. So when you see B flat, B diminished, C minor 7, C diminished, you can also hear it like this: B flat 7, G7, C minor 7, A7. So in reality, each minor 7 chord is really just being approached by its dominant 5 chord, disguised as a diminished chord. What works is arpeggiating one of the 4 dominant 7 chords within that family. A really common way, because it sounds really good, play an arpeggio starting on the 3rd of the triad, B, D, G, then play the 7th, the F, then play the other 3 arpeggios. One way to get a more colorful diminished chord is to add tension notes. The rule is you can add a note a whole step above any of the chord tones. The easiest way on guitar is to take the double flatted 7th and add the major 7 instead. You can arpeggiate it or you can play the chord. You can also superimpose these chords over the diminished chord instead of arpeggiating them. Bill Evans, piano player, and guitarists Jim Hall and Ed Bickert use these fairly extensively. When you take both shapes up in minor thirds, you are eventually covering all the notes in the scale. They also make a great intro or outro. Here's another one that I really like a lot. And you can even play them over D7, F7, A flat 7, and B7 because they're derived from the same scale. You can take it even further. There are 4 major triads found in the diminished scale. I like playing triad pairs, a tritone or 2 minor thirds apart. Let's say I'm on a B diminished chord. I'll play a G major triad, descending coming down from the 5th, D, B, G, and then I'll go up on the D flat. The D flat is a tritone away from the G. So then I'll go D flat, F, A flat. And I'll keep moving that up in minor thirds. Because remember, with diminished chords, minor thirds is what it's all about, man. It's really cool. There are even more chords in the diminished universe. There are 4 minor triads found in the diminished scale that have the same root as the major triads we just discussed. There are 4 major 6 chords that have the same root as the major triads. There are 4 minor 7 chords that have the same root as the triads found in the diminished scale. There are 4 minor 7 flat 5 chords found in the diminished scale. And what notes are those built off of? All the available tension notes. And what do all of the available tension notes spell? A diminished 7 chord a whole step up from the chord you're playing over. So that means there are 2 diminished 7 chords found in each scale. As you can see, you can play all sorts of combinations to get cool sounds that you can create. Check out these other videos that will help you out with your jazz playing. And an A. A? Did I say A? I meant B.